What's up? It's nighty night time. I'm laying down while I'm editing this video because I'm very eager about getting this up. It is 1:30 in the morning, but before this even starts, I wanted to say that this video is kind of filmed a little bit out of order. One of my friends helped me reorder the way I wrote my essay, so I figured that the video should reflect that so that it flows, so that you feel like there's a flow to it. So yeah, just keep that in mind. It's going to get lighter outside and I'm going to get less wine drunk as the video goes on, but hopefully you enjoy it. Thanks for being here. This is my video essay about the self-colonization. What? You know what? Stick to editing. No more talking. That's it. I have been meaning to do this for a long time, for about 2 months, but I was speaking with a friend recently about the things going on with Rico Nasty, and she basically, my friend, told me that I needed to make this video now. So I'm doing it because it's really important and I feel very passionate about it. And lighting that candle. I was wondering, like, what's still on fire? Basically, what we learned today is that I'm 23 and know nothing about fire safety or having long nails because I am an immature lesbian. Now that that's over, queer black people continue to carve out our own spaces and safe havens, hoping that they will remain untouched by colonizers, cishet white people in general. Because all that we've ever had, any place that we've been, anything that we've established for ourselves has been whitewashed. And whenever we begin anew, it is with this anxiety that we only have a matter of time before it is infiltrated again. This confusing and cyclical nature of white people to like spew hatred at us, be extremely racist, and then take the cool parts of our culture and neglect the rest grows very tiresome. It is very aggravating. It is very frustrating. We are doing all the work to create these spaces and to feel safe and to have this representation for each other, creating spaces and calling out to each other when we shouldn't even have to do that to enjoy this thing, because there are cishet white people, cishet white men all around and dominating this space to the point where we can't even enjoy it. We can't even enjoy skating. We can't enjoy making art. We can't enjoy making music. We should not have to specifically call out other queer black people in order to enjoy a hobby. But I am really glad that we do that. I mean, this wouldn't even be a problem if I ever felt a sense of community growing up, you know, if white people never infiltrated these spaces in the first place. So now, yes, I am glad that these spaces do exist. And this is where voyeurism, this is where it rests in areas where white people are specifically excluded, yet for some reason they can't stay away and somehow they find their way in anyway, whether it be they're offended that they're being excluded or they believe that they are such an ally that they deserve to be in that space, and not understanding actual allyship or support, and they don't realize that that does not entail invasion. A friend of mine wrote an essay about black punks and the self-marginalization of white punks. They refer to this pattern, this phenomenon, this identity as a self-imposed minority status. Being white with blue hair does not make you an ally. Being white with tattoos does not make you an ally. Being white and queer does not make you an ally. Shallow alienation from your white parents does not make you an ally. Me again, really quickly. Any TV show, movie, media, whatever. If there is a dynamic where the writers or producers or whoever have to distinguish one character from the others and establish this sense of otherness from the more popular kids or whatever, they will make the characters who are other, even though they are white, possess qualities that are aligned with black appearances in order to create that otherness. And a lot of that times that ends up making them look more punk because they are white as opposed to ghetto or ratchet or black. That's a whole messy conversation, but a really interesting one, and I touched upon it in my click video,
when I was talking about Lane Abley from The Click and also Missy from the original Bring It On movie.
Much like the intersectionality of the alternative queer Black person, white people cannot separate themselves from their whiteness no matter how hard they try. A quote from my friend's essay, they refer to a text by Daniel S. Traber titled LA's White Minority, Punk and the Contradictions of Self-Marginalization. It reads, Traber explains how punk culture mistakes itself for being separate from the dominant white culture and whiteness, when in actuality it is the very mechanism that reinforces the negative stereotypes associated with working class non-whites. White punks perpetuating stereotypes that are detrimental to the navigation of non-white bodies in a milieu that views their presence as non-cohesive to productive society's goals. It really seems as though white people do everything in their power to avoid actually confronting the moving parts of systemic racism that are extremely accessible to them. So when they dress up in their spikes and their leather and their hair dye, I do question what they're fighting for and who they're fighting against. A grown white man asking an alternative Black person if they know every single fact about the band that they're sporting on their t-shirt is not punk. MGK is not punk. He is a leech and an enemy of Black culture, and he has done no work, and he is not talented. Alienation of the Black alternative person is the core of creating our own spaces, but the ease with which white people bounce around, especially cishet white men, moving in and out of our spaces is sickening. We had nowhere to fit in growing up, and we resonated with this style, this subculture, demonized by our own family and racial community, rejected by our non-Black alternative peers, and ended up being ostracized by literally everyone. So then we move through adolescence and into adulthood, and we make space in this room for ourselves, and here come the colonizers. They're the reasons why people don't see us as intersectional or multifaceted, multidimensional. The reasons people have a very rigid and small box that they want to fit Black people into. Anytime that we express ourselves or do something out of pure interest that might be seen out of the norm, it is forced out of our hands and then dominated by white people. Anything that we want to do, any way that we want to express ourselves that doesn't fit into this box is deemed as us attempting to be a different race or being someone that we're not, as if we can't exist as Black people and be alternative or enjoy things regardless of if our ancestors are the pioneers of said thing, said culture, said hobby, aesthetic, whatever. We have to have Black art collectives. We have to have Black girls who skate, Black girls who code, Black queer bars, Black people who blank, whatever, etc., etc., etc. Because the ownership of our identities fused with the ownership of our pleasures is imperative. And alternative, goth, punk spaces, whatever, are not white, and absolutely no one is more punk than a Black queer person. Another quote from my friend's essay, because punk subculture asserts itself as averse to whiteness, it is in fact a racially charged, non-physical space, unfavorable to those who don't have the privilege to dissent from white socioeconomic middle-class order, because they fail to exist in such spaces that rely upon essential characteristics of this order that they do not possess. The Black punk's racial identity, historically subjugated by Black status of lower economic and social capital, is the central cause to the Black punk's inability to take on the punk identity in a way that white punks are able to by means of racial stereotyping and the collection of power through this action of cultural domination and repurposing. This video isn't a history lesson, and I'm not going to give a rundown of the history of punk and how Black people are the origin of it. There are plenty of videos that exist that do that. I will even put them in the description below. But there are some key points about punk that I wanted to point out and make sure that I included, and they are as follows. A number of philosophical and artistic movements were influences on and precursors to the punk movement. The most overt is anarchism, especially its artistic inceptions. Marxism gave punk some of its revolutionary zeal. Nearly all British punk bands expressed an attitude of angry social alienation. In the UK, punk interacted with the Jamaican reggae and ska subcultures. The reggae influence is evident in much of the music, The Clash and The Slits, for example. The message of punk remained subversive, countercultural, rebellious, and politically outspoken. Punk rock dealt with topics such as problems facing society, oppression of the lower classes, the threat of a nuclear war, or it delineated the individual's personal problems, such as being unemployed or having a particular emotional and or mental issues like depression. Punk rock was a message to society that all was not well and all were not equal. All I'm saying is white punks would not exist without black people. They love to compare their issues to much bigger problems and think that that is an excuse for them to include themselves in spaces that they were not invited to. And they owe it to us not to intrude in our spaces and to not claim a subculture that isn't true. It's not true to them. It's not true to the way that they allow their parents to be blatantly racist at a dinner table so that they don't get their phone taken away or so they don't get cut off from their allowance. Black punks cannot rebel against a white subculture that is not inclusive of their identities along with race or class lines. So much so that the Nazi punk arose as the radical right wing of punk. But surprisingly, that is not the only N-word punk that has me heated. Viewed and credited as a pioneer of punk, Patti Smith occupies the music libraries of many people. Many of the white art hoes, many of their parents, many of the people who were scrolling through Tumblr, many people now who have matching feeds on Instagram. These are the people that are listening to her. Lenny Kaye formed a band with avant-garde poet Patti Smith. Smith's group and her first album, Horses, released in 1975, directly inspired many of the mid-1970s punk rockers, so this suggests one path by which the term migrated to the music we now know as punk. The punk title was applied to these groups by early 1976 when Punk magazine first appeared, featuring these bands alongside articles on some of the immediate role models for the new groups, such as Lou Reed, who was on the cover of the first issue of Punk, and Patti Smith, cover subject on the second issue. Here's my problem. Sure, Patti Smith made a dent in punk with her sound and her aggression, but I've got to come back to the fact that the fruition of punk wouldn't even be possible without black people and black music. So the audacity of a white woman to open up her little songbook, her notepad, jump in the booth, and crank out a track titled Rock and Roll is entirely beyond me. I get that there is an aggression that comes with punk. There's a lack of censorship. There is a sense of being outspoken. If Patti Smith is this rock and roll, if she is the outcast, the punk, if she's misunderstood and alienated and ostracized and disrespected, where does that leave black people and black punks?
Editing Amari is back. I literally just slept here. I wanted to acknowledge and make sure that I got across like the extreme irony in Patti Smith doing this, because not only is she comparing herself as a white woman and the alienation that she faces as a white woman to the experience of or black people, but she is aware of the fact that is used to alienate people and to separate them from the rest of society, and she's attempting to compare herself to that or align herself with that. When she's doing this, she's positioning black people as being non-punk by having that comparison, rock and roll, as if they wouldn't actually fit in that space anyway, as if she would have to specify or be like, I am this rock and roll because I am punk, but I'm also ostracized. Instead of acknowledging the fact that black people are adjacent to punk, they always have been and they pioneered it. I think it's also important for me to note some of the I said it wasn't going to be a history lesson, but I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned the fact that bands like Bam Bam, bands like Pure Hell, bands like Death, bands like Polystyrene all were the pioneers of punk. Patti Smith should not be credited for that. Patti Smith cannot be a pioneer of punk when Death existed and created punk before anyone even knew that it was punk. And for them to pioneer this genre and to have their reaction to their music be people are telling them that they're playing white music, when punk, they are the pioneers of it, they created it, it has not changed.
It amazes me that white punks tend to be the same. Like, this is really their ancestor. This is really their grandparent, great-grandparent. Because it's the same lack of self-awareness. If the only things that you can attribute to you being punk are the fact that you have a certain outfit on, or you skate, or you play guitar in a shitty band, you are not punk. I just moved out of, I almost said whatever, it doesn't matter. I just moved out of Columbus, Ohio, and I was a participant in the DIY scene there. And many of the men in that town are only talented in being utterly terrifying. I have no other way to put it. They are racist, they are misogynistic, they are assholes, they are abusive. These dudes are posing. They're claiming to like very niche things, or they gatekeep things that no one really cares about or things that they think make them cool or attractive, and as if they are allies. They're doing this to attract people to prey on. They are extremely dangerous, they are predators, and people just like them exist literally everywhere, especially because most of the people I'm referring to are cishet white men or very adjacent to that demographic. They are not separate from their white parents. They are not separate from any norm. They are simply upholding racist patriarchal systems in an alternative disguise. It's all proof. White people just really get off on playing pretend and dress up. Just look at Grimes. Like, of course we're scared and angry and seeking safety constantly, and space is separate from white people. All this to say, white people, especially those with large followings, have a very, very difficult time doing the right thing, assessing the bigger picture and looking outside of themselves, understanding, generally just being like actual allies. They either hesitate or they overstep, they ignore or they speak over marginalized people, they take up space and they gentrify everything. But like I said, no one is more punk than the black femme or the black queer person, and we are going to continue to take back and reclaim what is rightfully ours. We seem to be doing that on TikTok now, and it's nice to see so many people that look like me, that look like people that I saw at the Rico Nasty concert. But I do have my fears surrounding the behavioral patterns of the Euro descendants. White people see black people enjoying themselves and expressing themselves as trends that they can latch onto, and now that alternative music and style and culture have kind of been revived to the mainstream via this app, I feel like I have been holding my tongue a little bit, especially with the diversification of this subculture. But this is exactly why I encourage black people to gatekeep, especially if you're queer and especially if you're alternative, because laughably, white people think that punk is theirs. White people think that alternative spaces are theirs. Y'all owe Rico Nasty an apology, and I wish that y'all would leave us alone. I personally have never felt more represented in pop culture than I do right now, specifically in music and TikTok. But I don't really have TikTok, but mostly music. With my top Spotify artists right now consisting of Rico Nasty and Nova Twins and Lola Wolf and Less Sick Puppy, Jungle Pussy, Pink Panthers, Kilo Kish, Willow, Mimi at the Altar, Lou and the Yakuza, Doechii, Megan Thee Stallion, FKA Twigs. The presence of black alternative people, black alternative women, black alternative femmes is so concentrated right now. And we do have predecessors to thank for that, such as Nicki Minaj. Just by her controversies recently, she did opened up a huge space for alternative black women, black femmes, and black people in music. And Doja Cat was right to thank her for that space. We can also thank people like Khalees and Erykah Badu and Santigold and Lil' Kim and black female-fronted punk bands like Bam Bam. Rico Nasty is one of my favorite artists of all time. She means a lot to me. And I have never experienced such a comfortable and warm feeling as when I saw her for the first time in my life, the only time that I've ever seen her, live in Detroit. And I walked into this venue and saw so many people who looked like me for the first time at a show. I did not feel like a token black fan, a token black person. I just felt like I was in my community. I have so much gratitude towards Rico for creating a space like that, for being the type of artist that she is, the footprint that she's leaving as an Afro-punk artist, and allowing people like me to feel comfortable in a space like that and have fun at a show and not be so conscious about my race in a negative way in a space where I want to be having fun. This is really heartbreaking when I'm witnessing the blatant disrespect that Rico has been facing on Playboi Carti's King Vamp tour. It's horrifying. It can basically all be chalked up to misogynoir. In case you don't know what misogynoir is, it is sexism, racism fusion. Generally a hatred, disrespect of black women and black femmes. There is a super disgusting disregard for Rico's significance as an artist on this tour that she is on currently, all from a fan base of what I've gathered from Playboi Carti's fan base is that they are mostly white dudes or non-black dudes aged like 14 to 23 years old. It's just what I've been noticing. These are the same people who claim to love rallying and raging and turning up, but it doesn't happen when Rico is on the stage giving her performance. Rico being the epitome of raging, her music elicits moshing, turning up, headbanging, thrashing, yelling, screaming, having fun, being lit. Much in the similar way to how Cardi's fans are saying they like to respond to his music, yet they booed Rico during her performance during this tour. In Portland, a fan of Playboy Cardi's threw a glass bottle at Rico while she was performing. Rico jumped in the crowd. She attempted to confront the person who was responsible for throwing the bottle. The incident was diffused after security finally showed up. Rico has already faced several hardships on this tour, from the bottle to her speakers blowing out while she was on stage and not being aware of it for I think almost an hour. She ended up asking the crowd, like, why are y'all mad? Because they were trying to chant to her that the music wasn't working, but she said, why are y'all mad? Some were even booing her. She dropped the microphone and walked off stage, and the crowd cheered. She was extremely confused and took to Twitter with some very concerning tweets. I just wanted to note that these tweets are not just concerning, but they are such an apparent result of psychological torture, and I didn't know if I was going to include them or not, but I'm just going to give a trigger warning now as I read them. She has deleted them, but one of them said, I wish I was dead just as much as y'all do. Trust me, y'all win. And before that, she tweeted, I deadass need at least 2 hours out of each day just to cry. Crazy how I wanted a tour bus my whole life, and now I just be on the tour bus crying myself to sleep every night. This is a sort of breaking point when you are enduring this type of treatment. And before, like, she was saving face and saying, like, she's not going anywhere and, you know, playing it off. But this is really affecting her. Not to mention the fact that the person with the most power in this situation, Playboy Cardi, has not said a single thing. He brought her out on stage during one of the shows and hugged her or something, as if that were doing anything. Still hasn't tweeted in support of her, hasn't said anything to his fans in regards to them calming down or treating her with respect. Absolutely nothing. Megan Thee Stallion has showed up in support of her on Twitter. Right now, my personal opinion is she needs to leave. Like, this tour is not for her. I would love to see her on her own headlining tour. Her fans would love to see her by herself. She doesn't even need to be supporting anyone, especially not a man with a bunch of fans who treat her like this. But she has been so resilient. She's not left the tour so far, and in the beginning of her mistreatment, she went on Twitter to let the weak-ass little boys with blonde pubes know that she is not going anywhere. Which, unfortunately, saving face and pushing forward in this way, this is the sort of attitude that a lot of black femme and black women have to adopt to exist and survive. People hate us simply because we take up space. They are intimidated or threatened for some reason, have not caught on to the fact that we are the origin of almost everything that they enjoy. So it's extremely ironic for them to react to our existence with such malice.
I don't know how many times I'm gonna pop in here to say some extra stuff that I didn't include in the main video, but I thought that it would be interesting to point out. And if anyone wants to have a discussion on this, any of this with me, please let me know, because I could talk about this for forever. But I wanted to point out the similarities between stereotypes of punks and black women, being aggression and intimidation, anger, etc.
Rico's experience with this tour is a tragedy. All black alt people, girls, femmes, are extremely familiar with this sort of treatment. Seeing this situation blow up on Twitter and Instagram, and having my mom tell me, having friends text me about it, is just reminding me of a lot of my time growing up in alternative spaces. Self-proclaimed white punk people upholding misogynoir in much the same ways as their normie peers are everywhere, and they can be the quickest to resort to violence against black women despite their chatter surrounding punkness and dismantling the system and going against the norm. I had my fair share of hyperfixations, phases, interests, hobbies, ever-changing. I have ADHD. I am an intersectional person. This is just how it happened. Like Shan Spears said, I can't remember what video this is, but I'll put it up here. I listened to 1D, I listened to K-pop, and I had a scene phase. And the most interesting thing is the latter are both rooted in Black culture. The dialect, the hairstyling choices, the musical influence, the jargon are all attached to aspects of Blackness deemed cool or profitable by non-Black people. So it becomes really interesting to see non-Black K-pop fans defending their faves and their idols who have appropriative behaviors, who are grown, claiming that they appropriate out of appreciation and they love Black culture and they just want to appreciate this culture, speaking over Black people to say that, to defend themselves without listening. And those same people describing their concepts for their music as ethnic, hip-hop, urban, you name it, all while sporting box braids that they have renamed reggae hair. Like, I'm tired. And I want to say that that's a whole other conversation, but this is really all the same conversation. It's all the same thing, because being an alternative Black girl is so special, and it's so nuanced, and it's so unique, and it can be so joyful, and it can be confusing and scary and heartbreaking and overwhelming, rewarding, and all of these things. But the bottom line is, it feels like your identity is inherently a conflict, that different aspects of yourself are contradictory, that they're opposing forces, and you are left feeling misplaced and frustrated, especially if you grow up in predominantly white neighborhoods, towns, cities, areas, whatever. As this Black alt person in suburbia, in white neighborhoods, you must navigate your adolescence as the Oreo. Shan Spear has a very, very amazing video on this entire concept, being an Oreo and acting white. You, as this Black alt child in white suburbia, you're not fitting into mainstream Black spaces, being told that you are trying to be or act white, being rejected by mainstream white peers, experiencing microaggression or rejection or blatant racism by other alternative but white people or non-Black punk people in general.
I just remembered I have an experience with this white girl from my high school in Georgia who I thought was so cool because she was so alternative and liked music that I liked, but it was in a few grades above me and would always dye her hair and wear cool clothes, whatever. We were in the same theater class. One time she showed me this playlist that she had of her rap music, and the name of the playlist was the monkey emoji. This was before they even had Black people emojis. She was like, I put a monkey because it's for Black people, and then later got mad at this white girl for not knowing how to properly dread her hair, and then showed up with these disgusting spider leg dreads a few weeks later. So interesting. Her name was Autumn. F you, Autumn. You're told that you are trying to be white or acting white by participating in a culture that was pioneered by your own people. And white men in these spaces, white men in alternative spaces, love to challenge you. Challenge your existence in this space. Or they will weirdly and condescendingly praise you for being in that space as if it's brave, as if that space does not belong to you. Many alternative Black people have also recounted their experiences with Black family members or members of the Black community in general, demonizing them for having a darker appearance or participating in spirituality while rejecting Christianity, when the only reason that Black people even practice Christianity in the first place is because of colonialism and forced assimilation and cultural erasure. So you are being demonized for getting back to your roots, which is just, everyone's perpetuating the same racism, everyone's perpetuating this assimilation because white people demonized us in the first place. And when we try to get back to that, it's scary to others. It's scary for other people, for Black people to get back to their roots. The power that we hold. Trying to fit in places meant sacrificing the safety of very definitive parts of your identity. And safety is consistently a concern, whether you are Rico Nasty and you're having bottles thrown at you on stage while you're doing what you love, or you are a young Black person attempting to celebrate a part of yourself in the attendance of music festivals like Warped Tour, only to be exposed to patterns of predatory men fused with this frequent hypersexualization of Black women and Black children, Black young children, your naivete as a child, and your alienation as a Black punk person. All of these allegations about these men at Warped Tour, these men who are in these alternative bands, stacked
And Warped Tour was never a safe space. I feel like in these alternative spaces that are dominated by white people, they try to act like it's a family and everything's fun and like silly and but safe. Yeah, imagine how unsafe it is for Black alternative people to be in these spaces, especially if they're underage. In middle school, my best friend and I would go onto online chat sites, kind of like Omegle, but like for alternative people, where I would repeatedly be referred to as her slave or pet. Shout out to my bestie Logan. She said that it would be interesting to discuss the edginess associated with punk and how it's been warped into a lack of sensitivity and not caring as cool. People having dark humor, which I talked about, but a discussion on how punk has been bastardized by white people as bypass of hate as opposed to the roots of punk, which is the community of otherness. The person in this video, I will also put a link in the description below, does a really good job of breaking down why intersectional identities can't be broken down or separated, and how certain aspects of intersectional identities cannot be prioritized above others. Because no matter what, the experience of the Black alt femme is unique and it's extremely nuanced, and it's impossible to detach or break down such a rich identity, which is why Tumblr's own sensitive Black person, aka Mars Interlude on Instagram, founded the Art Ho Collective with friends Gabrielle Richardson and Sage Adams. Even after coining the term Art Ho and dedicating it to queer artists of color, white people started labeling themselves with the same title, hijacked the phrase, and coded it in yellow sweaters, oversized glasses, and Van Gogh socks. In an interview with Vice, Gabrielle Richardson says the digital world is full of young, vibrant artists of color who are breaking boundaries with their work. They are neither being credited nor compensated for what they contribute to culture and society. The space was needed for us, by us. We want to be on the same platform as these white men, but we don't want to be stripped of our identity in order for people to consider us as equals. Often when we are brought into these spaces, our narrative is only boiled down to our suffering, to a strange voyeurism. Queer artists of color spaces are important so that we can not only be there for each other in our times of sadness and need, but to also revel with each other and celebrate ourselves and our happiness. We create these spaces so we can have a platform, a place where we can nurture each other and grow. Unfortunately, the Caucasian infiltration of the Art Ho Collective was not surprising whatsoever. While people like Mars and Jam, aka 2Jam2 on Tumblr, were doodling on their selfies with colorful squiggles and dots, and Amanda Stenberg was uploading videos to YouTube about the significance of Black queerness and the harm of cultural appropriation, white people were behind their keyboard modifying their Tumblr URLs. They were purchasing Polaroids on Amazon, and they were collecting those Kanken backpacks so that they could say that these were the traits that contributed to them being an art ho. These were the aspects of their aesthetics that made them art hoes. As we turn to Urban Dictionary to define an art ho, a type of person. This individual is usually obsessed with everything artsy and is very pretentious and snobbish, because as a certified art ho, they believe they are better than everyone else. This is the type of person who could always be seen with a Kanken backpack, probably owns a record player, only eats vegan, organic, and free range, and will not shut up about how they aren't like other girls. Be aware of the art ho. They are dangerous creatures. An art ho is basically a Tumblr girl that's go-to outfit is a pair of mom jeans, most probably a yellow striped shirt or an oversized hoodie, fake round glasses that look like the ones of the girl in Matilda, Converse, Vans, Fila's, Dr. Martens, and a pair of Van Gogh socks. She keeps her hair in a messy bun most of the time, owns a mason jar of scrunchies, an Instax camera, all of the Harry Potter books, goes to Starbucks every now and then. Her favorite singers are Billie Eilish, Shawn Mendes, Ed Sheeran, Camila Cabello, Meghan Trainor. Finally, she thinks she's weird and quirky. So the founders of the Art Ho Collective created this space for queer people of color who are artists to have a platform, be compensated, and feel heard and seen, and a sense of community. They knew that they could not control the direction of the Art Ho Collective, that allies would also recognize what the collective was. But these definitions are the exact reason we should gatekeep everything. Anyone who sees this is going to have a negative connotation with the word or the term Art Ho, despite its origin, despite the reason the collective was even born. Meghan Trainor and Ed Sheeran and Shawn Mendes, like, are you kidding me? This is one of the things that really boils my blood, because I feel like I constantly see people to this day that are not a part of the targeted demographic of the art hoe collective claiming to be art hoes but having these qualities. Some of the time not even knowing anything, making any art, it's just this stuff. But I must note that there were two other definitions that I screenshotted from Urban Dictionary. First, coined by Tumblr user Sensitive Black Person, art hoe is a term specifically for POC or allies who are interested in any kind of art. The term has catalyzed a subculture of white girls and boys dressed in Kanken backpacks, art socks, and journaling. Someone who likes looking at art, making art, and expressing how they look in an artistic manner. Important to note that this word originally started as a platform for Black women and POC, not just women, but queer people of color. Amanda Stenberg and Willow Smith are famous art hoes. Some recommendations for any Black queer people, Black queer alternative people. I have recently been introduced to a podcast that's very healing called the Homecoming Podcast. I highly, highly recommend. This doctor has several episodes on a range of topics, from unhealthy attention seeking to getting over fear of commitment or fear of intimacy to guided meditations for oppression and marginalization. I also recommend watching Shan Spear on YouTube. Noisy's video about breaking barriers in the punk scene also influenced pieces of this video. Cheryl Okonkwo, I'll link all of these in the description, made a really interesting video about the rise of Black alternative people. Check all of those out. Thank you for watching this and hearing me and seeing me, and I will be back later. Should I be... That's it. That's literally it.